everybody, and welcome to our MS in Climate virtual info session here at Columbia Climate School. We're thrilled that you're going to be joining us for today's session. It's action-packed. We have a phenomenal faculty panel that will also be occurring during the second half of the session. I always like to do a shameless audio plug, just make sure that you guys are able to hear me okay, but I also think that it's a really fun exercise just to see how diverse and what a global audience it is that we are attracting here at Columbia Climate School. So as you are logging in, if you could type in the chat button, or forgive me, the Q&A if the chat button is disabled. If you could type in where you are joining us from, I would love to go ahead and see that, like specifically city and state. I do it every time, but I always think it's really fun to just see how diverse it is. So just for me to go first, I'm logged in from New York City. So if I could see where everybody's joining us from. Olympia, Washington. Oh, Betty, welcome. I'm so glad you're able to make it. Columbus, Ohio, welcome. Mississippi, excellent. Paula's in Montreal, welcome. Betsy's in San Francisco, welcome, Betsy. We have Manila, Philippines, Sacramento, London, UK, DC, Auburn, Alabama, Williamstown, Brooklyn, excellent. Brooklyn's in the house. My colleague Damaris will be very pleased as a Brooklyn native. Paris, France, welcome. We have Long Island, Stony Brook represented. Awesome, welcome, Jordan. Raleigh, North Carolina, welcome, Shannon. So glad that you guys can make it. We have India represented. Excellent, Ashish. I think there was, I was looking at the head count in terms of registration, and I think we had, India was the most represented in terms of international students. So you should have other company from India, so welcome. China, welcome, welcome. Anybody from Florida? I always say it, I'm a Floridian. I love to see if Florida is represented. Although my feelings won't be hurt if that's the case. Mike, you raised your hand. I'm wondering, are you from Florida? That would be great. Feel free to type it in the chat, or the Q&A, I should say. Troy, New York, welcome, Juliet. All right, excellent. So I'm glad that you are all joining me today. This is phenomenal. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and just briefly take you through the agenda of what we're planning on doing today. So we'll talk about Columbia Climate School for a broad overview. We are also going to share with you the student profile, so who studies at Columbia Climate School. We're going to deep dive into the MS in Climate, the curriculum, the professional development opportunities. I'll also touch on financial aid, the ever so riveting application process, and then we will conclude the second half of this session will be a faculty panel. And I want to spend quite a bit of time on the faculty panel because you'll gain the most insights out of Columbia Climate School through our faculty. So without further ado, I want to, from the top, introduce our faculty who are joining us today. Number one, the only, I always say the one and only, for Dr. Jason Smerdon. Dr. Smerdon is a professor of climate within Columbia Climate School. He is co-senior director for education and co-director of our newly launched MS in Climate program. He's the chief architect. He's designed the MS in Climate program in conjunction with our other co-director, Professor Ming-Fang Ting. He teaches courses on climate, environmental change, and sustainable development to both graduate students as well as undergraduate students. Professor Smerdon also lectures widely in public and private settings on the subject of climate change and its social dimensions. And finally, his research focuses on climate variability and change during the past several millennia and how past climates can help us understand future climate change. Thank you, Professor Smerdon. Next up is Dr. Radley Horton, and Professor Horton is a professor here at Columbia Climate School. His research focuses on climate extremes, tail risks, climate impacts, and adaptation. Professor Horton was a convening lead author for the third National Climate Assessment. He currently is the principal investigator for the NOAA Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessment Fund Consortium for Climate Risk in the Urban Northeast. And I always like to highlight, he is our faculty lead specifically for the Advanced Certificate in Climate Systems and Analytics. And then last but not least is Jeff Schlegelmilch. Jeff is a director for the National Center for Disaster Preparedness here at Columbia Climate School and is our associate professor of professional practice at the Climate School. In his role as director, he oversees the operation and strategic planning for the National Center for Disaster Preparedness. He also oversees projects related to practice and policy of disaster preparedness. And his areas of expertise include, interestingly, public health preparedness, community resilience, and the integration of private and public sector capabilities. And Jeff is our faculty lead specifically for the Advanced Certificate in Climate and Disaster Management. So we were very specific on the selection of these two faculty members, specifically Radley and Jeff, as it relates to two of our advanced certificates. And I'll make a little plug. We do have on November 25th another virtual info session dedicated to climate and food systems, where our other faculty lead, Professor Jess Fanzo, will be participating. So don't worry, we have additional content for you if food systems is that area of interest on this call as well. So now, in terms of just kind of giving you a broad overview of Columbia Climate School, and just to give you a bit of an introduction, I always like to anchor everybody in their understanding of Columbia University itself. So Columbia University is the fifth oldest university here in the United States, the oldest in the state of New York. And when you refer to Columbia University, you're referring to what many consider to be a blueprint research institution. Columbia University, that term signifies over 20 different independent schools, and the majority of those schools being professional graduate schools. So within Columbia University, underneath that umbrella, if you will, we have, for example, Columbia Business School, the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, Columbia Law School, the Mailman School of Public Health, the School of Journalism, which administers the Pulitzer Prize each year. We also have the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, in fact, which we just recently launched a dual degree with. I'll make sure to highlight that later. But the newest school within Columbia University, it was announced in 2020 and formally launched in 2021, is Columbia Climate School. And kind of our ethos and mission is that the world requires knowledgeable leaders to work with businesses, communities, governments, civil societies to address the climate crisis. And Columbia Climate School's graduate degree programs and other learning opportunities provide an interdisciplinary knowledge base for climate leaders with diverse interests and backgrounds. And you're going to see that throughout our education, throughout our, for example, also our faculty talent. I want to emphasize that this school is interdisciplinary, and it has to be interdisciplinary in nature, given how we need to address climate change. So now just jumping into our student actually, before I do that, forgive me, let me give you a little bit more though, history and background, because I do think this is an exciting year for Columbia University and the Climate School. You'll notice there that we have three different pictures on this slide, and it's because the Climate School, I would say, has three different footprints at the university. The first footprint, and a critical footprint at that, is Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, which is photographed in the lower left-hand corner. Lamont is a 189-acre campus. It's about 20 miles north of our Manhattan-based Morningside Heights campus. And in fact, this year we're celebrating our 75th anniversary at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. But that's the true beginnings of what I like to say Columbia Climate School. So while we are the newest school within Columbia University, our footprint has significant history. So Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory has over 300 PhD level researchers and 500 environmental researchers, all that fall within Lamont and the Climate School. It's ranked the #1 scientific institution in the US devoted to earth and environmental sciences. And Lamont has a very long-standing history as it relates to research within climate change. In fact, one of our professors is the first person to coin the term global warming in a research paper back in the 1970s. We also are very proud of the fact that Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory is where they developed the first model to accurately predict the extreme weather events associated with El Nino. So again, Lamont has a longstanding history in the climate space. And then we have our footprint, of course, in Morningside Heights, where the majority of our classes are held. And then finally, that's the middle photo. And then on the far right, we have our Manhattanville campus, which is the Forum. And that is where also many of our classes are held at 125th and Broadway. And in fact, many of our faculty have offices at the Forum building. So I always like to note Columbia Climate School has 3 different footprints. In terms of our student profiles, what I'm sharing with you today is specifically the sole degree program with which we offer, which is the MA Climate and Society, but I think it's going to be very helpful for you as prospective students in the MS in Climate program to better understand the students that you will be engaging with, as much of your core courses at Columbia Climate School will be shared with both MA and MS students. In terms of this year's class, we welcomed 121 students, 44% of whom are international students. They represent 27 different countries of citizenship, 18 states among our domestic students represented. And something else that we're really proud of is approximately 17% are the first in their family to attend college. We classify those students as first-generation college students, and the average age in our learning community is 26 years old. In terms of the academic backgrounds of our students, they're extremely diverse. About 1/3 of the students in our learning community have traditional STEM degrees like environmental science or environmental engineering, for example. And then about 2/3 of the students have social science backgrounds. And we also lump in, I'll just say, business school students as well in there. We have a growing number of students with undergraduate finance degrees, interestingly. But in terms of those social science backgrounds, they really, are extremely diverse. We have students that are economics majors, political science backgrounds, urban planning. We have students that also studied anthropology, gender studies. So it's an extremely diverse learning community, and their goals and ambitions within the climate space are extremely diverse as well. But now let's go ahead and discuss the MS in Climate program specifically. So this is the newest degree within Columbia Climate School. We're extremely excited about it. We just announced it, in fact, in September. And the fall 2025, we will be welcoming our first cohort. This is a STEM-designated 2-year 50 credit hour professional degree that gives graduates from diverse backgrounds an in-depth training in specific areas of climate expertise and prepares them to be climate leaders at community, state, national, and international levels. To give you kind of an aerial view of what the MS in Climate program looks like, I mentioned 2 years. To be exact, it's actually a 21-month program. And in terms of coursework, so credit-bearing coursework, you're looking at 4 semesters. You'll always begin with us in the fall semester. The spring semester would, of course, be your second semester. You'll notice here that you have a summer semester that includes an internship that is required within the MS in Climate program and will be our only program that has an internship component baked within it. And then you have a second fall semester, and you conclude with a spring semester where you'll notice you have embedded there a capstone workshop, forgive me. In terms of the fall semester, you are going to begin with your climate core. You'll also have an applied climate course built within that. In the spring semester, you'll continue your climate core, which we'll talk about shortly. You'll also then explore some elective courses and begin your advanced certificate requirements in that spring semester. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the climate core. So the climate core, what I always like to emphasize is, it's I would say the signature to being a Columbia Climate School student. I'm sure you're looking at many other graduate degree programs. The reason why you want to come to, one of the reasons I should say, is the idea of this climate core, that regardless of the industry or sector that you wish to work in, you have this kind of foundation knowledge and understanding in the climate space. So within the climate core, I like to begin with sharing the dynamics course. So think about the dynamics course. Dynamics of Climate Variability and Change is largely a physics class, and it's kind of teaching you the science behind the climate crisis. And to know, it also teaches you how to communicate the climate crisis with different constituents. So when somebody stops you on the street and says, do you believe in climate change? And your response is yes, and they ask you the why, you'll be able to communicate the why with a climate scientist, the why with a policy analyst, the why with a business leader, and the why with even, let's say, a K-12 audience. So it really does teach you not only the science behind it, but how to communicate it. Then we also have the two pillars of addressing the climate crisis. Of course, we have climate change mitigation, as well as climate change adaptation. Another course that we've been offering as an elective this year, but we're really excited to offer it as a core course, is going to be Climate Justice Theory, Practice, and Policy. All Columbia Climate School students, starting in the fall of 2025, will be taking this as a part of their core journey here at Columbia Climate School. And again, this course delves into climate justice by examining the ways climate change, as we know, disproportionately affects historically marginalized communities. We think that this needs to really be baked into your foundation understanding of how to address climate change. And then finally, there's a little bit of a nuance here with the climate core, and I am going to keep it broad, but you're going to have two quantitative methods courses. So the first quantitative course is going to be a course that uses R as your computer language program. And again, you're going to be diving into climate data, how to make decisions based off of climate data, how to interpret the climate data. This is obviously critical. We all know that data is key. The only reason why we know that climate changes exist is through scientific data. So this is going to be a critical course. And then we are going to have a second quantitative methods requirement. Think of it as a quantitative methods 2 course, but that course will be dependent on the advanced certificate with which you select. And we'll talk about the advanced certificate shortly as well. But for example, if you select climate systems and analytics as your advanced certificate, that course is going, or forgive me, that advanced certificate, your second course will involve a Python class, just as an example, where the other advanced certificates, you'll have a selective of quantitative methods courses. And I'm sure Professor Jason Smerdon is going to share a little bit more, can give a little bit more color to that as well. In terms of your summer internships, again, during the summer, you'll complete this non-credit internship, and you can do that at a nonprofit, private or public sector or research sector organization. I want to highlight the fact that, you might say, what, Alfred, if the MS in Climate is a new program, how do you have these organizations listed? Columbia Climate School has had a longstanding history of offering internships at for our graduate degree program, specifically the MA. That program is undergoing an evolution, but our career development office is very adept at helping students in terms of navigating the summer internship search process. And so we have a long list of organizations that have worked with our students. And again, all of that history then now can apply to specifically the MS in Climate program. And I think the summer internship is critical as it goes to that applied learning. And it's the ultimate kind of transforming concepts into practice, where you're taking what you're learning in the climate core and in your electives and applying them to a summer internship opportunity between your first and second semester. And then we have a capstone workshop. And again, the capstone workshop actually occurs in the spring semester, and students will complete that 3 credit hour capstone. Again, it's as a penultimate experience during that final semester. I like to highlight that we actually have all of our capstones last year published on YouTube. You can watch the videos of the different projects that our students have completed. And in fact, if I can ask my colleague Damaris Diaz to go ahead and include that in the chat, those specific capstone experiences. To give you some examples of past capstones, our students have worked with, I'm specifically from the Tampa Bay area, so I was very pleased to see this capstone from 2 years ago. We had a group of students that worked with WFLA-TV, which was an NBC affiliate, and Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and they assessed the Tampa Bay area's vulnerability compared to other cities along the West Coast, and glean an explanation of the city's vulnerability under current climate conditions. This is especially speaking close to home because this was an especially challenging hurricane season this year, particularly with Helene and with Milton. We've also had students that worked with the United Nations Foundation on Climate Environment Program. We've also had students work with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I really encourage you to check out the link that Damaris Diaz has copied in the chat box to see our students in action. You can watch those YouTube videos and see all the different clients our students have worked with in recent years. And then we have, of course, climate school electives. And I always like to note that we've seen a significant evolution at the climate school. I started in March of 2022, and I think that academic year we offered 3 electives. This year, we're going to offer over 20 different electives. And you can see they're extremely diverse, from the politics of climate in Asia to climate mobility, climate change law and policy, Black ecologies, financing renewable energy. We have a growing interest in climate finance here at Columbia Climate School. So we've offered, in fact, 2 climate finance related electives this fall semester that students are really excited about. But again, it's an extremely diverse listing of elective opportunities. And then, of course, I want to also note that, you're coming to Columbia University for that, and Columbia Climate School for the incredible power that is Columbia University and the idea of cross-registration. And you're going to especially see that flesh out in your advanced certificates through the selective opportunities. So now let me briefly discuss the advanced certificates. So one thing I want to anchor everybody in is that in the MS in Climate program, an advanced certificate is required. There's only one pathway where you don't necessarily have to do an advanced certificate. You will do a dual degree, and that's through our very exciting Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation dual degree opportunity with the MS in Architecture and Urban Planning. And actually, Damaris, if you wouldn't mind, if you could also share that State of the Planet announcement in the chat box, I noticed some of our students did indicate an interest in that dual degree, so feel free to share that State of the Planet announcement there. But I want to now just touch on these advanced certificates. There's 18 credit hours. You will select one of these to complete the MS in Climate program. But I want to also note that as applicants, you are going to share your most interested advanced certificate, but you're not locked into that advanced certificate. You actually don't declare the advanced certificate until the end of your first semester. So in terms of the advanced certificates, you have Climate Systems and Analytics, which provides the critical skills and understanding to interpret and analyze climate and weather data, understand climate model predictions and projections, assess climate-related risks to human and natural systems, and develop strategies for mitigating these effects. We then have climate and disaster management. Again, we have Jeff on our panel, which I'm very thankful for. And Jeff's as I noted earlier, the architect of climate and disaster management, this advanced certificate, which provides students with the foundational knowledge and skills needed to conduct and apply research in various intersecting disciplines relevant to managing disasters. And students will gain new insights into disaster management, particularly in relation to preparedness, response, recovery, and long-term resiliency best practices. And then finally, we have climate and food systems, which focuses on the intersection of climate with food systems, food production, and human livelihood. And students learn how to apply evidence-based approaches to food systems transformation, gaining critical skills and knowledge specifically for professional pathways in this emergent field. I can't say enough how critical food systems are as it relates to climate change. And again, I want to plug that. We have a November 25th info session all about food systems coming down the pipeline. So if you are selecting food systems, make sure to register for that upcoming event as well. So now what I want to do is just very briefly, I want to touch on what the course content looks in each one of these climate advanced certificates. So within those 18 credits, you have 12 credits of a required set of courses, so 4 courses. So for example, in climate systems and analytics, you have courses like climate risk impacts and adaptation, climate modeling, GIS for climate applications, and then computing and research methods for climate data science. But then you have additional selective courses to choose from. And this is just a sampling, and we absolutely foresee an evolution in this. But in terms of the selective courses, you would select 6 credits worth of courses on that list on the right, for example. And what I really want to key into, what's interesting here is the idea of the cross-registration journey. And the fact that, for example, in climate systems and analytics, we will have certain courses embedded within the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences that you would be able to enroll in while in the Climate Systems and Analytics, or within the School of Professional Studies, or within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So again, I want to stress we are a interdisciplinary school, and we form many partnerships, of course, across Columbia University. And so you can see there's, for example, a School of Engineering course could be machine learning for environmental engineering and sciences, and a course embedded within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences would be idealized models for climate processes. And then we have the climate and disaster management. Again, you have your 12 credits of required courses listed here. And again, you have a list of selective 6 credit hours. And some of these selectives are embedded, of course, within our climate school elective journey, like financing disasters, or regional climate science and forecasting. And then we have some additional opportunities across Columbia University. We're highlighting 2 courses in particular here within the School of Professional Studies. And last but not least, we have food systems, where you have 12 credits of required courses, and then again, these 6 credits of electives. And some of these electives are baked within Columbia Climate School. There are electives within Columbia Climate School, and then some electives across Columbia University. In this case, we have a course at the Mailman School of Public Health, Food Security, Plant Biology, Climate Change, and Public Health. We have a course at the School of International and Public Affairs, like Agricultural Environmental Policy, and then the School of Professional Studies, Smart Agriculture for a Changing Climate. I'll briefly touch on career development as well. In terms of our career development office, we have a dedicated career management team, a director of career management, and a career management officer devoted to Columbia Climate School students. We have employer info sessions. They have a lot of one-on-one counseling that includes resume, cover letter reviews. They also will help you with negotiations when you do get a job offer. We also offer an alumni mentorship program at Columbia Climate School. And the mentorship program is not only for Columbia Climate School alumni, but also for alumni of different partner programs across the university that you're able to connect with. We also have a sustainability skills seminar series that we host every year. We host around 12 of those. They include, LEED certification, if you're interested in becoming a sustainability consultant. There's a variety of sustainability skills seminars that we host. Every February, we have the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair. This last February, we had just over 1,000 students across the Ivy League descend on the Columbia University campus, and nearly 100 employers. Columbia Climate School is the school that hosts that event. We also have an exclusive job board listing here at Columbia Climate School for our students. And then just to give you an idea of sectors of employment, and again, this is for the MA Climate and Society, but it's still very helpful to see what kind of alumni network that you are joining, and kind of the different industries that our students have entered. You can see about 31% in the class of 2022 and 2023 entered the private sector, about 21% entered the public sector. We have about 27% in the nonprofit and NGO space. And just to give you an idea of the types of roles our students go on to work in, you can see it really runs the gamut. You have students for example, in local government, like the city of Seattle or Los Angeles. We then have students in the private sector, for example, at Boston Consulting Group or at Apple. We also have students at UNICEF, the United Nations, the World Bank. So it's a very, very kind of broad listing of, I guess I should say, there's no cookie cut Columbia Climate School student. Climate is a very kind of broad area and it touches all industries, sectors, and you can see that kind of play out in terms of where our students go on to work in the climate space. So in terms of one thing I want to note is we will have our website updated in the very near future. I can share that the MS in Climate, the tuition and the website will have, I promise you, will be updated in the coming days. The tuition is going to be roughly $32,000 per semester for a 4-semester program. But I want to stress that we are going to have robust financial aid available. So let's first talk about fellowships and scholarships. Number one, there are climate school scholarships that are going to be available and that you as applicants will automatically be considered for climate school scholarships. So there's no separate admissions application to be considered for a climate school scholarship. We also have the one key there for the climate school scholarships is that you want to apply by the January 15th deadline, and I'll talk about that shortly. Another element that I like to highlight, if any of you joining the call today are students that are veterans of the United States military, we are a proud member of the Yellow Ribbon Program for U.S. military veterans under the Post 9/11 GI Bill. If you do have questions about the Yellow Ribbon Program, you're more than welcome to schedule an appointment with me, and we can have additional conversation around what that funding level looks like. And then we also encourage students at this stage to absolutely explore external fellowships. And my colleague Damaris Diaz in the chat box will share some links for external fellowships. But now is the time to start looking at outside organizations if you were interested in kind of engaging in that research. Not in the spring after a student is admitted. Now is the time to start looking into external fellowships. So we do have some interesting directories that we'll make sure to share with you in the chat. And then finally, private and federal student loans. Many of our students access private and federal student loans. And in fact, I know quite a few joining the call today are international students, and international students do have access to private loans. We have two organizations that specifically provide funding that does not require U.S. co-signers. One is Empower and another is Prodigy Finance, and I'm happy to share additional information as it relates to those organizations for any international students on the call as well. I want to go back to the climate school scholarships, though, too, and just give you an idea. Just under 60% of our enrolling Columbia Climate School students for the fall 2024 intake received a climate school scholarship, and the scholarships levels range anywhere from $10,000 to upwards of $35,000. And every single year, we do increase our scholarship availability. And I have seen it for the last 3 years, seeing an increased ratio in scholarship recipients. So I really want to encourage you to move forward with an admissions application if you feel like this program is well aligned for you, and absolutely apply by the January 15th deadline. In terms of our online application, it is a holistic process. January 15th, you're a priority deadline candidate. Decisions are released in March. Again, if you're interested in those scholarships, take advantage of January 15th, and the final deadline is March 1st. In the online application, we ask for your resume, 2 letters of reference. One should be academic if you've been enrolled in a university within the last 5 years. We'll need your unofficial college transcripts. If you attended multiple universities, we will need all of those uploaded to the online application. If you are a international student and English was not the language of instruction in your undergraduate university, we'll need a test score, either a TOEFL, IELTS, or a Duolingo English test to show English proficiency. And then finally, the statement of purpose. And I want to just say the statement of purpose is extremely important for our admissions committee. It really allows our admissions committee to understand your motivations for the climate school, what your ultimate goals are, how our program can fit within your climate journey, and what you will be bringing to the table. I'll just say the statement of purpose is up to 1,000 words, and there's 2 key data points that you should be reflecting on. Number one, as an MS in climate student, we are interested in hearing a little bit more about which climate core course you're most excited to complete. It can give some interesting insights into your candidacy and kind of your motivations for climate by sharing which climate core course. Maybe it's mitigation, perhaps it's adaptation, maybe it's climate justice. Perhaps you're really, really excited about learning the science behind climate change and dynamics is your favorite, but we would like to hear kind of which climate core and why, and then also which advanced certificate you are most motivated to pursue, bearing in mind that the advanced certificate you are not locked into as an MS applicant at the time of your acceptance. So your acceptance letter is not going to indicate the advanced certificate that you're accepted to. You do not declare your advanced certificate until the end of your first semester. All right, excellent. So now that brings me to our faculty panel. And again, I just want to welcome our faculty. Thank you so much, Professor Jason Smerdon, Professor Radley Horton, Professor Jeff Schlegelmilch. Thank you so much for joining us today. And maybe if we could just kick off with Jason. He works so closely with this program and kind of the building out of this program. And the building out of Columbia Climate School, quite frankly. But I'll just throw this out there. Jason, if we could begin with you, and maybe what do you think makes Columbia Climate School so unique?
Thanks, Albert, and thanks for giving a great introduction to the program. Well, I want to encourage people to step back for a second and just pick up on a couple of things. First of all, the Columbia Climate School is only 3 years old. It was the first in the country, and so the novelty of that idea of establishing a climate school should not be overlooked. And then within that, we've created these brand new educational programs. And so what you've seen may be laid out in bullet point fashion. You may not be actually, I think, getting the gravity and the scope of what this actually represents. This is a brand new educational initiative that's bringing students in to study the challenges of the 21st century, specifically through a climate lens. And the idea behind all of these programs is that climate change is one of the most pressing issues of the 21st century, requires all hands on deck approach. And our idea with these programs is to give every student who's coming through a foundational experience in climate, which is, we think, fundamental. All of the students should understand something about all of these different core subjects. But then if they go on into the MS in climate and do an advanced certificate or a dual degree, allow those students to get depth in specific areas that allow them to take specific career pathways. And so the idea of constructing it and doing it that way is completely novel and new here at Columbia. And we've really led the way on thinking about what should be in the curriculum, how to build it, and how to package it in ways that are going to be useful for different career paths. So I want to give you all that context as you think about these different pathways to take, and not to overlook the fact that the scope and novelty of what we have here at Columbia is really unparalleled. So the other thing that I would just say in terms of the uniqueness of Columbia is, as Alfred mentioned, we have this long history of working in the climate and sustainability space. And so what we're leveraging here at Columbia, in addition to these new things that we're building, is a long history of experience within these spaces, how to teach in these spaces, and all of the research and practice that's done in these spaces at Columbia. So if you come in as a student, you're going to be able to engage these new and novel educational programs that are going to send you in career pathways for the 21st century, but also immerse yourself in all of the activity that's going on here. And that's something that you should also be mindful of and think of as a distinct advantage of Columbia. Just about everybody working in the climate and sustainability space comes to Columbia at some time. There are researchers working in the physical science spaces and the social science spaces and the humanities spaces, all thinking collectively about climate. And the energy of putting all those people in one place is impossible to ignore as a student coming into it. So that means research opportunities. It means all kinds of events and activities that you can engage to increase the amount of learning that you get while here, that takes it out of the classroom and into experiences that you'll have hands-on doing research or interacting with practitioners in through various events. So I wouldn't overlook that aspect of what we offer here at Columbia as well, which is just an incredible amount of activity going on across these climate and sustainability spaces that as a student you'll be able to take advantage of.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. And Radley, any kind of your insight, your take on Columbia Climate School?
Yeah, just to sort of add a little, maybe on the practitioner side to what Jason just mentioned, in terms of, our location specifically in New York. Whether it's some of the instructors we have who teach at Columbia from time to time, who are technically outside of academia, or whether it's the opportunities for capstones, internships, sort of hearing special seminars. We literally, for example, provided the foundational climate science that New York City uses for all of its resilience planning, right? The sea level rise projections, the vulnerability assessments for urban heat island effects, sort of community by community. That's all science, that was sort of led out of Columbia with other partners. So, you're really getting that chance sort of hands-on, as New York City, for example, more than ever, looking forward over the next 4 years, is going to be trying to continue to show that leadership around adaptation to climate change and around greenhouse gas mitigation. So you get a chance to sort of be there as they face those difficult policy questions that need a science contribution as well. So, I could say the exact same thing about New York State, where we've also been centrally involved and where you also see a state, showing real leadership within the US. Our private sector connections as well, being in New York, in terms of other sort of powerful levers and engaging the private sector. And also just to, mention other organizations, the UN, we have so many events and opportunities to to engage with the UN. And just to close out the comment, also some of the sort of leading NGOs, whether in the sort of more environmental space or justice and equity spaces, all those opportunities are really central. And it's a co-production model. We're all learning together. This isn't sort of the old model of scientists sort of handing over the information to the decision makers. It's this nuanced new space that Jason alluded to, where it is all hands on deck, learning and applying together.
Excellent. Thank you. And then, and Jeff.
Yeah, and I think, echoing, certainly I share the sentiment of my colleagues of Jason and Radley as well, too. The other piece that I would point out is I think one of the key features is that, if you just look at the breakdown of who's on this call, if you look at the breakdown of our students, and if you look at the breakdown of where they go, a lot of sort of traditional sciences are very reductionist. They kind of break things down into essential components. And climate science and the space that I work at and disaster science are inherently intersectional. They all come together from different parts, different fields of science, different fields of expertise, and people then need to take it into different sectors, whether that's government or finance or nonprofits or multilaterals. And so one of the most exciting things, I think, particularly, around the school as a whole, and that I enjoy in the courses that I lead, is the diversity, diversity by all its forms in the classroom. And that means that it's not only a greater sort of diaspora of the work as it leaves, but it's a greater integration of multiple perspectives in the classroom discussions and the case studies and the projects, and just makes for a very enriching, very intellectually deep, but also very applied type of environment. So we hope to see all of you there.
Excellent. And now, like, if I could, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. I want to afford time for our students also. So I guess my next question, the last one before Q&A, is I'd like to pivot now to those advanced certificates. It's a signature of the MS Climate program. It's a second credential that you are getting while graduating from the MS Climate program. And since I have this particular set of faculty, I'd love to talk a little bit more about maybe climate systems and analytics and disaster management. And why is it important? What skills are learned? And maybe, Jeff, although disaster management has to be important, but like if I could hear, Jeff, if we could start with you with disaster management.
Yeah, and on the first day, so there's a number of courses, as Alfred pointed out earlier. But again, the journey starts with a survey course, essentially looking at sort of a variety of different modules in the space of disaster management. What are the different areas that we focus on? And we look at the social sciences, the behavioral sciences. We look at the impacts of climate change, sort of different administrative structures. But on the first day of class, I always kind of ask my students, why are you here? Why are you taking this class? And inevitably 2/3 to 3/4 will raise their hand and will say, I'm not sure. I know that this is really important. A lot of times people have very personal stories where they've witnessed things or have had loved ones affected by disasters. And they say, I know that this is going to be a big part of what I do, but I don't know exactly how. And that's perfect. That's, and some people do, I should say. It doesn't mean the other third to a quarter to a third are wrong. Some people have a clear vision, right? They want to go into disaster management, or they want to focus on finance in this domain, and that's fantastic too. So really being able to kind of come into this and sort of go through that journey of looking at how all these different fields intersect, and then getting into courses like building equitable community partnerships, right? We have to bring in a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different incentive structures within applied disaster research methods, right? How do we sort of consume disaster research? What does it tell us? What does it not tell us? As a very young science, there's some data, but a lot of that data has caveats. How do we work within that uncertainty? And some of the courses we're building and other ones we interact with are all designed to sort of give the tools so that whatever sort of field people go into, maybe they'll be a disaster manager, maybe they'll be leading the next generation of emergency managers in the US or internationally or somewhere else. Maybe they'll go work for the UN, maybe they'll go work for an aid organization. Or maybe they'll work for that power utility that gets called into the operations center in the aftermath of a storm, or they'll be working on development policy and say, wait a minute, does this take into account increasing urbanization amidst increasing flooding? And sort of give the tools to be able to understand that intersection when they're in the midst of it. So Yeah, happy to answer any questions on all of that, but it's really designed to sort of wrap our arms around all of the various fields, maybe not all, but as many as we can, and also to create very experiential. That's the other thing I would say is within all of the courses and all the work we're doing, this is a very, very applied track. The assignments in the classroom are very, very similar to the assignments we get from the people we to our clients, to the people we we do contracts with, or from our experiences in government. And at any given time, we have a number of students in this program who are actually working with us. Each year, we have roughly a dozen students who work directly for the National Center for Disaster Preparedness on projects, and beyond that, who we help sort of bridge relationships with to different groups within the field on topics related to this. So it's a very empirically grounded but applied certificate.
Excellent. And then Jason, maybe if you can speak on or Radley. I mean, let's go with Jason. The climate systems and analytics. I always like how you talk about data to Jason. If you could share like kind of the why it's so critical.
Yeah, let me say two things in terms of motivation, then Radley can maybe talk about some of the career paths and so on. But fundamentally, climate is defined as the long-term mean of weather. So at the very heart of our definition of climate is a quantitative statement. And if we want to understand how climate has changed in the past and how it's going to change in the future, we have to be quantitatively minded and be able to look at the problems of climate, at least in the physical science space, with quantitative methods. The other factor is that our climate happens on a sphere, and being able to characterize how climate is changing, evolving, being able to use climate model projections, we have to be able to work in that three-dimensional space, four-dimensional when you think about the actual measurements you're making. You have to be able to work with data and interrogate data effectively. And so if you want to be able to ask questions of the climate data that we have, you need to have tools that allow you to do that, namely programming and data visualization tools. And then you have to be able to communicate what you find quantitatively to decision makers who may not have the same skills that you have. And so the motivation for the analytics track is to give you the tools and the background to be able to work with climate data, ask questions of climate data, and find answers to those questions that you're asking. And it's a large task. We work with petabytes of data across the collective climate and climate model databases. And so being able to work with those data requires building your tool set in terms of the computer programming skills that you have, as well as the analytical tools that you have, and then an understanding also about where the data come from and how the data are constructed. And so giving you all of that information so that you can then go into different career paths with that quantitative understanding, those quantitative skills, we believe is critical for multiple career paths. And I'll let Radley expand on this, but just if you want to work for an insurance or reinsurance company to assess their risk, these are the kind of tools that you will need. If you want to assess risks for any companies, given things like the SEC filing and an assessment of the risks for corporations more generally of climate change, you need to have these skills. If you want to work for a municipality and assess the risks of sea level rise over the next century, you need to have these skills. You need to be able to interrogate these data sets and then visualize and communicate what you learn from these data sets to people who are making decisions based on them. And so that's really the heart of why we design this specific track and why we think it's important.
Yeah, I'll just quickly build, and then I want to get to questions. But yeah, everything Jason just said, and really it extends all the way, of course, into broader risk assessment, right? This is the place where you go deep in this certificate into understanding the impacts of climate change across sectors, whether it's public health, whether it's economic and labor productivity, whether it's interactions with pre-existing vulnerabilities that some communities might have. Those quantitative skills that Jason was talking about get us beyond the physical hazard realm into these questions of how unique ecosystems and populations are going to be affected by those changing climate variables. And those same quantitative skills come into play when it's time to make specific decisions about how we should respond, right? Which type of adaptation strategy? Is it a hard infrastructure solution like a seawall? Is it a nature-based solution? Is it something that just strengthens communities and leads to sort of societal resilience. You're going to develop the skills to compare different solutions in a policy space. So as Jason alluded to, some of the graduates go on and sit in those, say, insurance firms doing the quantitative modeling. Some go into academia. Others who might pick policy, for example, through this program will be able to critically assess. Someone is telling them, trying to sell them, say, a downscaled climate product. How robust is this? Is it fit to purpose for the decision that I need to make or not? You also get the ability to communicate about those types of that type of information. So it's that quantitative, qualitative blend. I would say the overall umbrella is risk assessment, from physical hazard to societal impacts and vulnerability to devising solutions.
Hey, thank you so much, Radley. Thank you. So let's now go ahead. There's some really interesting questions now in the chat. And maybe we'll kick off this one. This one will be interesting, I think. I think Jason will appreciate it. So one of the questions says, though knowing students from all backgrounds can apply, and thank you, that's encouraging. We want to be encouraging. Whoever anonymous is, we want to be encouraging. I'm concerned that if students need some kind of science background or basic knowledge for some classes, like the quantitative models, is there any support to help students with no science background at all? So Jason, would that be, I think the math boot camp comes to mind immediately, but any insights that you want to share on that?
Yeah, so you mentioned the math boot camp, which is an experience prior to even arriving that students who feel they want to brush up on their mathematics skills can and should do. And that's provided by some professors in our program to help spin students up in some of these spaces. What I would say in terms of the courses is that, so I teach the quantitative methods course, and we make no assumptions about students' backgrounds in these courses. So this is the virtue of an interdisciplinary program. We want to build out a foundational amount of knowledge and skills through our core, but our assumption is those people coming into the core have varying degrees of preparation in these spaces. And so as instructors, we're aware of that and think about it, and our classes are designed to accommodate students who are coming from all different backgrounds. And then I would say another dynamic that plays out is this question is focused on maybe science, physical science and quantitative skills, but it's true in an interdisciplinary program. You could have people coming from physical science backgrounds who don't have the experience in the social sciences and humanities. And so what happens across the curriculum and what we've seen as instructors is there's a lot of peer-to-peer tutelage that goes on as well. So the instructors are aware that people are coming in from interdisciplinary backgrounds, and the students tend to interact through assignments and the group projects and things that they do over the course of the curriculum. There's a lot of peer-to-peer tutelage that goes on, and that has, I think, two interesting impacts. One, it helps bring some students who may not have the background in a given class, it helps them learn the material more effectively. And secondly, the people who have the background in these spaces get the experience of being the translators and the teachers as well. Now, I want to make clear, we don't lean on that explicitly, but it is something that happens naturally within the courses that we think is a really effective part of this interdisciplinary experience that we've built.
I would just add, we've actually found in some of the disaster courses very similarly, where, if you sort of jump into some of the courses a little later on in the process, there's some terminology that's a little esoteric. There's some concepts that we take for granted that we're exposed within. We actually stole some of the ideas, actually, Jason and Radley, from the Quant Boot Camp, and do some lunchtime sessions, just some primers and things as well to get up on that. So I think as we continue to build as well, too, sort of recognizing to create opportunities for folks who do want to get a little more fluent in some of the terminology or some of the quantitative elements and things like that to help get a leg up to recognize it's to make that available as folks need it.
This next question is interesting. I mean, I just think it's interesting. You described the diverse student profile and interdisciplinary nature of the program in school. Are there any gaps in the student profile you have identified and/or backgrounds and experience that y'all, I like it, Thomas, are if not recruiting for, at least keeping eyes out for? I mean, I'll throw this. I think we really do have an incredibly diverse student population. In fact, Jeff and I had a brief call right before the session started, just how different all of the students he recently hired at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness are in terms of their lived experience. But I have interesting phone calls recently. For example, I think students that are working in maybe sectors that you might not think are necessarily uh, so climate focused, but I spoke to somebody recently that's a commodities trader in oil, that's interested in climate. So I we encourage students that work in various sectors, and we have to work with students because the climate crisis obviously uh, has to be looked at from various industries and sectors. I don't know, Jason or Radley or Jeff, do you have any insights on that? I think we do a great job, but we're always looking for more diversity in perspectives and lived experiences.
Yeah, I think I'll state the obvious. I mean, I think that we're always looking to increase the diversity across our program through many different angles. But, ultimately, I think something that we need to continue to work on specifically in this program is recruiting more students from the Global South and other marginalized communities to have a voice at the table as students, and ultimately to educate leaders to go into those communities and have impact as a result. So, I think we're doing a good job in those spaces, but we always could do more. And that's something that I think as a program, we continually try to improve.
Yeah, one thing I haven't sort of kept up with, but that would be interesting to look at is indigenous communities as well. I don't know if we have any data on applications in that space, but just based on what we've seen, across most universities, I suspect that's an area where certainly would be good to encourage. Continue to encourage applicants.
Yeah, and another area I know we've talked a lot about, and of course similarly our building, but always always welcome more. I find representation from the humanities also is a really important sort of conduit. How do we take sort of this like really complex analytical information and sort of integrate that into more of a sort of these harder to define ways? I come from an arts background myself way back a long time ago. And it's, where you do find that crossover of sort of storytelling within the context of these things. There are just some really beautiful exchanges there that, we're fortunate to have some intersections with and always looking to grow more.
Excellent. Another kind of a broader question relates to, can the experience also be personal? I'm assuming that you're relating to the statement of purpose. And yes, I'll just say, I work on the admissions side of the house. I work closely with our admissions committee. Our statements of purpose, many students interweave, for example, a personal experience as to what their motive. And in fact, Jeff knows too. Jeff reads many of these applications, but a personal experience oftentimes can be a huge motivating factor for their interest in the climate space, and maybe they've been deeply impacted by the climate crisis. So yes, I've seen that thoughtfully represented in many different statements of purpose. One other question I'll just throw out there, and I can respond to it, but if anybody else has any other insights, feel free, is that what is the main difference between the MS in climate and the MS in sustainability management? Well, I'll just say this immediately. The MS in sustainability management program is a 36 credit hour, can be completed in a 1-year program. They have over 400 students enrolled in it. About 2/3 of those students are working professionals. So all their courses are offered in the evening, night. They have some online course options. So for the student that's asking about MS in sustainability management, if you are deeply interested in kind of a part-time journey, flexible journey, you're a working professional, the MS in sustainability management is a phenomenal option. They also have a large number of full-time students enrolled in that program. I think a huge difference is the fact that their program is very flexible in nature as it relates to the required courses. They actually have content areas that they explore within. They don't, so it's not a cohort-driven model. You might share just 2 classes with a student while you're in that program, and then the person that you're sitting side by side with in your first semester, you might not see them until your final semester for a capstone course. So it's very flexible in nature. It does not have what I like to say the climate core built within it, nor does it have embedded within it this second credential, which is an advanced certificate in climate systems analytics, climate food systems, climate and disaster management. So any other insights that anybody else would want to add to that, Jason?
Yeah, and I would say substantively that the SUMA program is more focused on management and finance. And it's a sustainability management and finance. So there are other pathways and other framings of sustainability that the students in the SUMA program pursue. we have explicitly built these programs as educational experiences that look at the world through the climate lens. So the climate lens is the specific issue of sustainability that is considered within our programs. And that doesn't mean that given the skills, you couldn't go out into other sustainability spaces with the educational tools that you gain in the MS in climate. But we very intentionally have focused on the climate challenges that need to be addressed. And then I would simply say, as Alfred already mentioned, it's a deeper dive. So this advanced certificate, the additional credits really give you more depth in specific areas that are aligned with career tracks, as opposed to the SUMA program, which has fewer credits, is more flexible, but there aren't as many pre-designed tracks through the program that necessarily align with career tracks.
Another question from Marilise asks, how do students get hands-on experience in courses? Do you have partner organizations that share their data sets and project information for students to work on, real-world situations? Or do students do hypothetical work for assignments? I just want to say right from the top, you're going to get a lot of hands-on experience in an internship component and a capstone component. So that we baked it into the MS in climate, but I'd love to hear Jason, Radley, Jeff, your thoughts on the actual like course content and partnering with organizations.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. Well, so on the disaster certificate, and I know that other programs do this too. There are some travel courses and things like that that also sort of provide direct kind of field experience. Within the courses that I lead, we do. I would say it's even when we do the hypothetical, it's drawn from existing cases. One example in the survey course is the final is a series of papers. So you choose a resiliency initiative, and then you write 3 different value propositions for 3 different kind of sectors of the community: the private sector, policymakers, homeowners, kind of depending on what initiative you choose. We do group debates that are, group negotiations on opposite sides of a resilience issue that are based on, it's like Law and Order, ripped from the headlines, right? The case studies are based on real events. And so where we can within the courses, we do connect it with fieldwork. So the course right now, it's a summer course, the Building Equitable Community Partnerships and Disaster Risk Management. So we actually have the students have you all do a group project in collaboration with a partner that we're working with at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness. And it usually is a memo with guidance on how they can take a project that they're doing and ensure, they're looking in the right places for community engagement. What are the best practices? So actually sort of translating that into it. And then, of course, the work experiences where we do have a very direct deliverable-based kind of work that we integrate students into. And I think in a few of the other areas too, I know there's a small travel course that we've had the last couple of years that's not under me, but that goes to Colombia on spring break and other examples like that as well too. So depending on the courses and depending on the nature of it, there's a range of opportunities.
And certainly within the courses, case studies, for example, for the risk course that I teach, we spend a couple of weeks sort of unpacking the sort of behind the scenes, day by day of how we worked with New York City government over the last 15 years or so to build out resiliency and justice plans.
We actually have right now a couple of students working with me on a project to curate case studies to use in the classroom. So they're using an applied experience to curate applied experiences for other students. It reminds me of this Mitch Hedberg joke. I saw a forklift lifting a crate of forks, and it was way too literal for me. But anyway, that's.
Another question from Thomas. I love the y'alls, Thomas. Do y'all feel the grunt and the boots on the ground practitioner perspective are well represented in the student profile, faculty, and curriculum? How are y'all looking to maintain and improve that perspective? I'm assuming like the student that's actually doing the work or has done the work. We absolutely have students that worked in the climate space and now they're at Columbia Climate School to dive deeper. What I'm trying to say is we do have some profiles, Thomas, of students that are pivots. They're pivoting into the climate space, but then we do have students that have actually worked in the climate space at the United Nations or the World Bank, and now they're coming back to the climate school to gain additional insights and to further skill up. Do you guys have any insights on that? on
I mean, we certainly do, like in the courses. So I've got, a former emergency manager in the disaster management class. I've got a former negotiator for the UK government for the UNFCCC, former COP negotiator in the classroom. We have former journalists. So I had someone who works in finance and in management consulting in the classroom. So certainly among the student body, I think it's extraordinarily well represented. I say that, but at the same time, we also have a lot of folks who are much earlier on in their career and sort of have identified where they want to go, and they see a pathway for how this gets them there. And so that it really is very complementary. When I talk about sort of the diversity of experience, it's also the diversity of how long they've been in the field. Some bring a lot of sort of stories from their careers where it's either a pivot or an enhancement, and others with a really fresh perspective bringing in, and it's well served by all across the faculty as well too. I think we have folks with very deep careers within academia, sort of developing the science that we're basing this all off of, and also a higher proportion of professors of practice, which are people than in other cases. Which are people who are coming from career fields. Myself, I've spent most of my career outside of academia, although I guess if I stay long enough, I won't be able to say that as the proportions change. But anyway, but this is all to say that, and I do want to say that while I am sort of talking about it being very practice oriented, I do want to say it still does have a very, very strong and very important foundation in the science and in the empirical nature and the empirical process. And so there's a balance, and I think it's actually, to me, one of the things I love most about the school is having that great connection to the deep sort of science, and then that connection point with so many colleagues who are out there, going to COP, being part of the negotiations, consulting with the UN or consulting with other organizations to help kind of triangulate the science with the practice.
Excellent. And just one more question, because I want to be mindful of our professors already being very generous staying on, but if I could just ask one more, and I think Jason will like this one. We have a thoughtful chart out there on it, but Jason, maybe if you could summarize, what would you think is the main difference between the MA and the MS, in essence?
I'm going to start with what's the same. They both are built on the climate core, so they both take all of these climate core classes. They both have a capstone and applied element to their experiences, but the MA is shorter, so it's completed in 3 semesters, while the MS in climate is completed in 4. The idea of the MA is that the students who come in can build on that climate core and take perhaps more traditional social science or humanities pathways. So very much in the spirit of what an MA is, even though we have a STEM designation. Some of the students that we expect to go to the MA will have interest in those spaces. And it's more flexible in the sense that there's more electives to sort of build, particularly in the 2nd and 3rd semester, in terms of how the students tailor their classroom experiences in that 2nd and 3rd semester. And then what it doesn't have is this deeper dive specifically in a career-aligned space like we have in the advanced certificates. So I think they're both wonderful pathways. They serve different purposes and potentially slightly different student profiles, given that one is more aligned with social science and humanities perspectives in the electives and sort of flexible space beyond the core, while the MS in climate provides a deeper dive in specific career-aligned areas that tend to have more quantitative depth in those spaces.
Excellent. And I think that's a brilliant spot to pause. I do know there's additional questions, and I'm happy to address those in one-on-one appointments. So I do have an appointment calendar booking. Feel free to access that. I also want to stress that we have additional events coming up. We're being very thoughtful about our additional events. Just because you attend one doesn't mean you've heard it all. We have different speakers at each one of these sessions, whether it's a different student speaker, different faculty. We have upcoming an application tips and strategy session with 4 current students talking about how they tackled their application process, really thoughtful suggestions as it relates to the statement of purpose, as it relates to accessing recommendation letters. And then we also have a current student appointment scheduler. If you want to talk to a current student in Columbia Climate School, if you want to hear an unfiltered opinion, what do you think about the classes? How is the balance in life? Did you transition to New York? What was it like? You can ask all of those questions of our current students. So I plugged both of those. Again, this is a start of a conversation or a continuation of a conversation. It doesn't end here. So if you have follow-up, please feel free to reach out. And I really look forward to connecting with you. And then finally, I want to thank our faculty that joined today. Jason, Radley, Jeff, you guys are instrumental in putting this phenomenal new degree program together. You're the heart and soul behind it. And thank you guys so much for lending your perspectives. And again, we really look forward to seeing you guys continue your applications or starting your applications. Take care, everybody.